something, and the answer would be, no, we don't have the money. I very quickly associated money with the ability to do whatever you want, or freedom.
Is it fair to say sort of that's what was driving you?
I never did what people told me to do. It's easy for me to do things that other people aren't willing to do. Started learning about taxes from about 12 on. While I was in the military, I'm making $12,000 or $13,000 a year, and I go to 4 different banks on the same day, and I take out $7,500 a piece signature loans. And I go open a Scottrade. I don't take, long positions in equities. I buy options. And the worst, best thing that could have happened did. And I made about $150,000 in 6 weeks. I thought I was a genius. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. And that's probably the worst thing that could have happened to me, because I just thought I was good, when the reality was I was just lucky. The market craters and I lost all of my money. I owed the brokerage firm 50 grand and I owed the banks 30 grand. I had a negative net worth. And the beautiful part about that was I was 23. I was young enough to fail and recover and get back on the horse.
How you guys raise money and exactly what you do?
Find a way to get paid to learn the business and then level up your knowledge and go out and do it on your own. Ironically, I had a client stiff me on a commission. He said, well, when you have the money, you get to make the rules. And I said, cool, 2 things are true. Number 1, you're fired. Number 2, I'm going to go out on my own and start doing deals. You will never see another deal from me again. Good luck.
You want to invest in something that is going to cover or exceed your monthly expense to carry. Why is that your philosophy?
I have made millions of dollars because of people that use debt the wrong way. You can use that tool to build a house, build an empire, or you can use that tool to tear down that house.
How do you analyze your investments? Is it gut? Have you developed it like your own algorithm? What is it?
Common sense. Intuition's a wonderful thing. You need to be just a little bit uncomfortable. Very few deals have I done where I just say with 100% certainty this is going to work out. If you're 100% certain, you might be a little bit too lacking humility.
September 11th, 2001 made a huge impact on you, and that you decided you wanted to go serve our country.
America is by far the greatest country in the world, but our government does not tell the truth 100% of the time.
On this episode of Boundary Breakers, I sit down with Thomas McPherson, who is a real estate genius, I would say. After serving some time in the military, after enlisting, after 9/11, he's been in the real estate industry since then. And he's done extremely well out in Arizona. Curious about the industry as it exists now and what's ahead and what's around the corner. I asked him a wide range of questions about, is technology going to disrupt the industry? How is AI going to play a part? How does one get started in the real estate industry? And what are the next hot areas in terms of investing? We have a really interesting discussion. He has some really fascinating takes on several things, and I think you're going to like this one. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. What I call your origin story, where you grew up, that kind of thing?
Happy to. So I grew up in Missouri. I was born in Springfield, Missouri. I'm a hillbilly by trade, I guess. And so, it's good. I grew up mostly in St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, part of the world. And I grew up in what I would call, a middle-class family. We never wanted for food or for shelter, but there wasn't much more than that, where I grew up. And I frequently heard from a very young age that, I would ask for something and the answer would be, no, we don't have the money. So I very quickly associated money with the ability to do whatever you want, or freedom, So that was, I think, part of the genesis of my interest in finance and financial independence.
Yeah, I love it. Did you have brothers or sisters?
I do. 3 younger sisters, 4 of us in total.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there's
I love it.
Pretty good size, age gap there. 7 years, and then 1 year. So, it's practically by the time that I was getting out of the house, I had a 1-year-old, 2-year-old baby sister, and I just kind of high-fived her and said, good luck.
I hear you. I've got 5. I actually have 5 kids. They're a little bit closer together. But I understand. Yeah. I mean, the older one is so disinterested in what the younger one is doing. It's sort of hard to relate. So I totally get it. But that you made an interesting comment. You said you often ask for things, and the answer was, we don't have enough money. And so from an early age, you associated money with freedom. And so is it fair to say sort of that's what was driving you by the time you got out of the house?
It definitely had a big factor. Absolutely. I'm a bit stubborn or willful or foolish, however you want to kind of think about that. But it made being, a teenager very difficult because I never did what people told me to do, right? And that can have its own set of challenges. However, it's made being an entrepreneur very easy, right? Because
Yeah.
it's easy for me to do things that other people aren't willing to do. And so I actually started learning about taxes. My uncle was a CPA, started learning about taxes from about 12 on and became very interested in real estate. I was doing little things with my stepdad kind of around the house and in the neighborhood. And, I learned that other people are doing it in a big way. There has to be another way, right? Everyone is kind of in that line waiting to get into the club, but there has to be a side door or a back door or try the second story, window, whatever it is. There has to be a different way. So I started doing like mock stock picking, when I was a teenager and things like that. And just to make the story just a little bit longer, I was in the military for 5 years. I served for 5 years in the Navy, stationed with the Marine Corps. And while I was in the military, I finally kind of got up the courage after a couple of deployments. I'm making $12,000 or $13,000 a year, and I go to 4 different banks on the same day, and I take out $7,500 a piece signature loans. So I $30,000 of borrowed money from the banks. And I go open a Scott Trade, which is, of course, an old stock trading platform. And I open a Scott Trade trading account, but I don't open a cash account. I open a margin account.
Oh,
And
wow.
I don't take, long positions in equities. I buy options. And the worst, best thing that could have happened did. And I made about $150,000 in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I thought I was a genius. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. And that's probably the worst thing that could have happened to me because, again, I just thought I was good when the reality was I was just lucky. And
Yeah.
without, protracting the story too much longer, essentially what happened is I traded sideways for a long time. September, October 2008 happens. I'm getting out of the military. I bought my first house. I moved back home. I don't have a job yet, and I'm ending a long-term relationship. The market craters, and I lost all of my money. I owed the brokerage firm 50 grand, and I owed the banks 30 grand. I had a negative net worth. And the beautiful part about that was I was 23. I was young enough to fail and recover and get back on the horse. So that was one of the best things that could have happened to me, all things considered. But that really is what pushed me into real estate. Is I said, I trust myself more than I trust people on Wall Street that I've never met that say everything's fine on Friday and then Sunday they're bankrupt.
Yeah.
I'm going to trust my relationships, my community, my ability to influence outcomes more than I'm going to trust other people. And so
Yeah.
that's why I've been in real estate ever since.
No, I love that. And isn't it funny how we don't really learn all that much when things go well, but it's when things sort of do the opposite that we end up sort of extracting the good from it. I do want to make sure we sort of dig into this or get this out there. So if I understand it correctly, September 11th, 2001 made a huge impact on you, and that you decided you wanted to go serve our country. I graduated from the Citadel. I got medically disqualified. They were pretty, you were just a little bit younger than I am. I was a senior in college. But would love to hear just a little bit about that. And then in particular, what, if anything, that you learned while in service were you able to bring out and still maybe apply today?
Well, it happened. I was a senior. I just happened to be a senior in high school, and surreal, in hindsight now, surreal. I can only imagine what it was like for the people in New York. But, all we did was watch on the TV, every single class. That's all we did. Watch what was happening. Of course, as a kid, you don't really understand like what's happening, like, oh, this is a big deal and that's bad, but you don't
Yeah.
understand the how the world is shifting into a new order. You just really don't understand some of these things. And of course, we find out more because initially, like, oh my gosh, tragedy, a plane goes into the World Trade Center. And then, a second plane goes in, wait a second. And I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, man. I was absolutely drinking the Kool-Aid. Hey, we need to go do something about this. We need to, and fill in all those blanks that I think, the media and the government propaganda machine helped us fill in our mind. And, the sad thing was, I think me and a lot of other young people, great men and women of our country signed up to do what they thought was a good thing. And I think we were, to a certain extent, sold a bill of goods. And, in that sense was we were told Iraq had weapons of mass destruction when in fact they really didn't, but they did have a lot of oil, right? And I didn't find a lot of weapons of mass destruction while I was deployed, but I did see a lot of Halliburton trucks.
Yeah, right.
So, in hindsight, I wish I would have been a little bit more discerning, but military service ran in my history. One grandfather in the Army Air Corps in World War II, the other grandfather in the Air Force in both Korea and Vietnam. And I just thought it was frankly kind of my duty to go serve. And what happened was I was really kind of on one side of the aisle, deep to that side, and traveling around the world and being forward deployed, you really understand that America is by far the greatest country in the world, but our government does not tell the truth 100% of the time. And it really changes your worldview. And quite frankly, we labeled a lot of the people there as terrorists, but if there was a Chinese or Russian tank rolling down my street, I'd be doing what I needed to do to try and get them out of my country,
Yeah.
So I certainly don't begrudge the people there of Iraq anymore. They call themselves freedom fighters, and I get it. We were an occupying force in their country.
Yeah.
So that really had a huge impact. And some of the amazing lessons that I learned are, of course, discipline. You learn that in the military. You know that from being in the Citadel. And one of the other things I learned was, as a leader, what are the things that you need to do as a leader? And I'd probably say the number one thing that I've come away with is alignment. I love this concept of alignment, and it is alignment on risk and reward. And if I, as the leader, can have everyone aligned on those two things, then almost everything else will fall into place. Motivation will fall into place. Integrity will fall into place. A lot of these other things will fall into place. For example, we actually lost a commanding officer of one of the companies that I was with, Captain Rappacolt Whiskey Company. I was on the quick reaction force that responded to the VBID that took him and several great Marines out. And, he was willing, our Captain Rappacolt, our commanding officer, they were willing to lead from the front. They were putting their lives at risk to do what the mission required to be done. And that was something that I hold these men in tremendous respect for being willing to do so. And then, of course, when we would get back to base, if there was, hot food or something like that, a private could, and again, you probably know this, but a private could punk out a lieutenant or a captain, hey, sir, I think you're lost. This is the front of the line. Your spot's back there, and that's taking care of your troops that are the people that are in your stead, right? They put their trust in you. You need to take care of them. And that is alignment on the reward side. And I've just carried that mantra over into the real estate investment world, or the investment world more broadly. And kind of the way that we do that is on the risk side, me and my team, we all have money invested in our different investments. But instead of investing pari passu on par with our investors, we've actually taken a subordinate position. So we ever lose money, I lose my money first. My team loses their money next. And then and only then do our investors lose money. That is alignment from the risk side for our investor base. And then reward side is very easy. You make money first, and then we make money. And I think if we had better alignment, you'd see better decision making. A really great kind of example of this is I've got a friend at another company. He's a fantastic asset manager. They're looking to purchase an asset. They have it under contract. They're finishing the due diligence period. It's a $50 million asset. They're going to get a 1% acquisition fee, right? And at the end of the due diligence period, he tells his boss, hey, I don't think this deal's a go. And the boss says, we're buying it. There's a 1% fee. There's a $500,000 fee on the table that we're not giving up, right? And the company and the leadership didn't have money in that deal. So they weren't really aligned on the risk of that. And so they did. They wound up buying the deal and they wound up selling it at a loss. And it's all because of those kind of misaligned motivations, if you will, optimizing for the wrong things.
No, that's a great example. But how unusual, I love the structure that you guys have in terms of you lose first and you win last. How unusual is that in the real estate investment industry? In terms of, do you know of any other firms that do that?
I just saw one other firm start copying us. And, initially there's a little bit of a pang that's kind of like, how dare they? But the reality of it is, this is a good thing. I wish everybody would copy us and adopt this model, because I think it would flush out a lot of bad actors. And that's one of the problems with, our industry. Real estate is known as kind of an alternative investment. I don't know why it's known as an alternative investment. I think that's very good branding by stock and bond companies.
Yeah,
But,
right. Good.
I think it would flush out bad actors that have their self-interest, more at heart than the self-interest or the interest of those that they're there to lead and to serve. So it's very uncommon. We do see one person copying it. I hope a lot more people copy it, because I think that it will help bring about better structure within our community that will, in the long term, lead to more adoption of real estate investments like ours.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. Well, so I want to take a second and take a few steps back and ask you some very basic questions, and I want to do so from the standpoint of, we've got our audience is, it's a lot of sort of students of leadership and of business and entrepreneurial, ways. And, there may be some folks that are, thinking about, on the younger end, potentially thinking about a career in real estate and find themselves inspired by what you did. But people typically tend to talk past some of these basic things. Like, I got into real estate. Well, somebody may be thinking, what does that even really mean? And how did you do that?
Yeah.
And so can you take like maybe 3 minutes and just like from a very basic standpoint, explain the company that you started, how you guys raise money, and exactly what you do?
Absolutely. And before I do that, let me just take that note real quick. For people that are interested in getting into real estate, people, I got into real estate. I think what I did was my path in was to start off as a commercial broker. I was brokering multifamily apartment deals to clients. I started in late 2009, so it happened to be great, fortuitous timing. But I had the opportunity to learn the business, get paid learning the business with minimal risk until I felt I had a sufficient level of knowledge to go out and do it on my own. And I think that if you are interested in the business, unless you're a high income earner, engineer, doctor, lawyer, accountant, whatever that may be, unless you're a high income earner and you want to get into the business full time, find a way to get paid to learn the business and then level up your knowledge and go out and do it on your own. So that would be how a lot of the people that I mentor, the young people, I say to them to do just that. Find a way to get paid to learn. It's a beautiful thing.
That's great advice.
And so how did we get started? I started my first company in 2012. I was 27 at the time. As I mentioned, I was a commercial real estate broker. I was in the military 5 years, commercial real estate broker. And ironically, I had a client stiff me on a commission. And he said, well, when you have the money, you get to make the rules. And I said, cool, 2 things are true. Number 1, you're fired. Number 2, I'm going to go out on my own and start doing deals. You will never see another deal from me again. Good luck. And
I love it.
He did just fine, and I did just fine as well. But the takeaway there is I started this one company and I got big into a myriad of different things. The market at the time was the Great Recession, and it was almost exclusively distress, REOs, short sale, auctions. I did a lot of loan purchasing and loan workouts and debt resolution. Fast forward a little bit, the market stabilizes, it's going up. I start touching all different kinds of products here in my market in Phoenix: office, industrial, retail, land. And I've been sitting with, now being out of the military for several years, and some of the things that I did and saw are catching up with me. And I'm going, I really want to be a part of creating a better, more beautiful world and try and tip the scales. I felt like I did some stuff, participated in a lot of human suffering. And I did a little research and I found out that buildings consume 40% of our energy worldwide, the single largest consumer of energy worldwide. And I thought, I was in Iraq because of one resource, oil, right? An energy resource. Well, if I can help reduce building consumption globally, I can be a part of reducing conflict globally over energy resources. And I got really turned on by sustainable development or high performance development. And not so much in the kind of tree hugger hippie sense, not that that's good or bad, but in the sense that let's do it better. And so I really got into that. I got into high performance sustainable development as well shortly there. And I've done a couple big projects. I also got back into the distressed debt space in 2019. After doing all of these different projects for about 10, 11 years, I decided to synthesize my knowledge, synthesize my network and experience, and start this company, Lukrom, taking everything that I've learned and putting it into practice. And one of the most important things I learned, I was just at a conference recently where Jim Collins spoke. Fantastic author. Jim Collins is amazing. And he said, first, who, then what and how, right? And I really took that to heart. So key, so critical. I focused on building a great team of people to then go out and serve the real estate community. And so that's what we've done for the last 2.5 years. We have an amazing team and we're out there in several different verticals. We raise money from our investors to do a couple different things. One, we do private lending, and I've been in the lending space now for about 15 years. Two, we do some ground up development. My last big project was with a local family office of a billionaire here in Arizona. That project won Sustainability Project of the Year for Arizona. We're very proud of it.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. And in addition to that, we do some acquisitions, some development, some assemblage. So a little bit of everything in that real estate space.
I got it. So private lending. So for those that may not have access to traditional lending, bank lending, mezz debt, whatever it is, you as a private lender help fill that need in the commercial real estate space. Is that fair?
That is very fair, very accurate. And just to piggyback onto that, the residential space as well, non-consumer debt financing. So really, private lending is what we would call business purpose lending. And I love it. It's near and dear to my heart because, I was a 24-year-old, new to Phoenix, didn't have a lot of relationships. I heard the name of this guy that was a private lender, a very kind of well-known private lender here. And they said, hey, he'd lend to you. And I found, and this is kind of funny to say, years ago, you start dating yourself now, but I found a fourplex that was available in the marketplace for $80,000, right?
Wow.
And I know, those are the days. And I had about $20,000 of of my money and some friends and family that I kind of scraped together. And I go to this guy, Scott, and I say, hey, Scott, can I borrow $60,000 to take down this fourplex? And he meets me and he goes, you're articulate. I like the military service. Yeah, let's do it. So I do. I buy it. I do a little sweat equity, and some friends helped me, build out this fourplex. We wound up selling it for $140,000. So it represented a great investment for me. I was paying him 18% interest at the time, right? Now, and that was market. That was market, right? Because this is the Great Recession. There wasn't access to capital. It was a liquidity crunch. But that allowed me to then go to the next one. And now I'm in the game, I'm playing the game. And I literally, with that one relationship, I transacted tens of millions of dollars. He lent me, again, tens of millions of dollars. And I bought and sold and flipped hundreds of units, loans. And it's because of private lending. I was a young guy. I didn't have a traditional job. I had a 1099 job. I'm commission based. So very difficult to underwrite then, and even more difficult now with the Dodd-Frank Act. And private lending is faster and it's easier than bank debt, right? So people always go, but you're more expensive. Why would people pay 12% instead of paying the bank 7%? And I go, well, the bank will give you a loan maybe in 30 or 60 days, and you have to provide tax returns and W-2s and bank statements and all of this stuff, blood, your left arm, firstborn, crazy. Whereas my company, we can give you a yes or no, typically within 24 hours, and funding, thereabouts or a couple days later, right? So if you make an offer on a deal and you're getting it $50,000 below market, but you have to close in a week, you're happy to pay $5,000 more in interest. Your net profit just went up $45,000. So that's kind of that middle space that private lending is serving, is those folks that are moving quick outside of the bounds of what the traditional banking industry can serve.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. Well, so you've lived through and experienced several different sort of market phases, I'd say, right? I mean, the lead up to 0809 through 0809, and then the last 5 or 6 years, which has been interesting, at least on the residential side, in terms of some supply and demand imbalances. So what take us to school here? What are you seeing? What are your personal thoughts on what you're seeing in the real estate market? If all this tariff trade war stuff is going to, impact, what do you see over the next couple of years?
Well, I think that our current administration I think the world is starting to figure out how the current administration plays, which is to take a very extreme position, and then kind of like slowly back down from that extreme position and then claim victory at some point in time. Whether or not the original objective, which is, secret kind of behind closed doors, maybe they were aspiring for certain things and they're getting those. I don't know. I'm not in those rooms. But I will say I am glad to see that someone is standing up to China and other people in the world that are stealing our intellectual property, and they do have unfair trade practices. They subsidize a lot of their industries. So there's some good stuff that I think is coming out of this. Frankly, I don't think that the trade war will meaningfully impact us going forward. We may see some short-term inflation bumps, but at the end of the day, what do they say about real estate that continues to be true even during COVID? And it's, location, 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 right? There are markets that are far surpassing others, right? Nationally. What do you want to look for? You want to look for economic drivers, right? Population growth. Here in Phoenix, we've got one of the largest fabrication facilities in the world that was recently announced by Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. I have no economic interest in the company, but they just announced a 165 billion with a B fabrication plant up in North Phoenix, right? And they're already done, I think, with the first phase. Why are they doing that? Well, China's become very aggressive, right, towards the island nation of Taiwan. And we're experiencing incredible economic growth because of that and other factors. Why? Well, I look at places and I look at things outside of your traditional lens, right? We have no natural disasters to speak of here in Arizona, right? We've got some fires up in the north, but no real fire here in Phoenix. We've got we've got stable infrastructure, Our power grid is very stable. Our highways, trains, and other things are very stable. Our airport, again, very good infrastructure here. We've got population growth. We've got a very pro-business government, not only from the judiciary, but also the legislative branch, a very tax-friendly environment. And the list goes on and on. So we're seeing a lot of people moving from a tax regime like California, 13%. Between federal and state, you're paying over half of your income, not to mention property taxes, sales tax, and everything else. You may be paying 2/3 in taxes. This is crazy. You're moving to Arizona where you're paying 2.5%, right? Or Texas or Florida where you're paying nothing. Okay. Or they're getting out of the cold weather climates. A lot of people are moving here from Chicago or the northern Midwest, things like that, because they want to be in a place of sunshine for the majority of the year. And so I would say if you're looking to invest in real estate, look to those markets that have great economic drivers, look to those markets that are experiencing population growth, and then think about those ancillary things that maybe have a longer lead time that will influence those outcomes, right? Like California, from my perspective, is only going to get probably worse. There's a fantastic website. I forget where it is. It's something like Where the Money Walks or How the Money Walks, something like that. And it tracks data and movement of the population. And you can see what states people are moving to who have means.
Yeah.
And certain states are green, certain states are red. I would not be investing in red states.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, that's really, really insightful. And I think what I took from that was that the answer to that question is sort of a hyper local one, right? Like what market are we talking about here? It's, I think, very difficult outside of these sort of historic once in a generation type things where the entire national market, experiences something crazy. But if I hear you correctly, or would it be fair to say that, you got to look at the market, the individual market dynamics in each individual, geographic location and make a determination what's going to happen?
Absolutely. And I certainly think if you're just getting started or you've got a lower level of experience, you have to invest for cash flow. IRRs and appreciation don't pay the bills.
Yeah.
Don't invest in deals that may work out.
Yeah. So let's talk about that and break that down a little bit. So I guess I'll say it in as layperson a way as I possibly can. So you want to invest in something that is going to cover or exceed your monthly expense to carry it, right? That's what you say. That's what you mean when you say invest in cash flow, as opposed to go into a whole bunch of debt, rolling on, and roll the dice on the fact that it's going to appreciate in value and you're going to be able to sell it for more at some future date. Why is that your philosophy?
I have made millions of dollars because of people that use debt the wrong way. And that was because I got my start in 2008, 2009. And I view debt like a scalpel. It can be surgical and it can perform miracles, or maybe in a more appropriate analogy is a hammer. You can use that tool to build a house, build an empire, or you can use that tool to tear down that house, right? And so if you're using that tool improperly, it will go against you. And you want to be able to, as you just alluded to, buy a property, service all of the expenses, service the debt, and then hopefully there's some amount left over that gives you a return on your original investment. But at an absolute minimum, you do not want to feed the monster, right? At least not starting out. More sophisticated investors who are doing entitlements and development, that's a different story. But at the most kind of basic level, you need to be able to do that because economic conditions do change, right? Rents might soften, vacancy might soften, unfettered immigration is a bad thing, but we do need people moving here. The US only has like a 1.9 birth rate, right? We need a 2.1 for population stability, guys. What's going to happen to our economy if the population starts going down? It won't be good. GDP is a factor of people and output. So those two variables, if people start going down, our economy will wobble. And, just kind of tying back to why it's so important to use debt and buy for cash flow is it gives you more options. Whereas if you don't invest for cash flow, you paint yourself into a corner and you limit your options going forward.
Yeah. What about like particular, I call it segments or what have you. I mean, industrial versus office versus retail. If you were mentoring somebody that had access to, to borrow some money, and they had a couple of areas to go after, where would you sort of push them?
I'll answer the question directly in just a second, but I'll give another question. And I was at I like gardening. I like getting my hands dirty, literally. And I'm at this wonderful little kind of small lecture, 20 or 30 people, and people are asking about urban gardening. And this guy asked a question. He goes, "What do you think should be the first thing you plant?" And he says, "Garlic or Brussels sprouts or, lettuce." And he named off a couple different things. And everyone had different answers. And he goes, "I'll answer at the end." And so he takes us through this little class and he asks different people different questions. What's interesting to you? What's interesting to you? What's interesting to you? Right? And they all had different answers. And he goes, "What you should plant first is that thing that is going to engage you and keep you engaged in the process." Right? Now, certainly, I think there's some better asset classes than others. If you're starting out, I really like the stability of multifamily. Industrial as an asset class has done exceptionally well. Office and retail in great locations and even good locations will continue to do well. In locations that aren't so good, I would be very cautious investing in office or retail in B- or worse locations. But the real takeaway there is invest in things that excite you so that you stay engaged in the process and you continue learning. That's the best thing to get started investing in.
Yeah. No, I love that. What do you say to those? You alluded earlier to what do they say about real estate? Nobody's making any more land, right? You can't
Right.
necessarily build more dirt, but when it comes to multifamily, really even office, you can't always continue to go up, and especially in places that are high growth places. You talk about multifamily, it seems like there's always another condo building or apartment building. How do you mitigate and really sort of understand the market that what you're buying, somebody isn't going to come next door and build the next, something just a little bit better. And all of a sudden, you mentioned rent softening, et cetera. I mean, how do you analyze your investments just from a very basic standpoint? Is it gut? Have you developed it like your own algorithm? What is it?
Of course, you want to use common sense, kind of number one. Number two, intuition's a wonderful thing. You've got an incredible neural network, if you will, in your gut. And in that kind of gut intuition, go with your gut. And so I think that you should certainly listen to your gut. I also want to say that you need to be just a little bit uncomfortable, you know? Obviously, you don't want to be scared, very, very, very uncomfortable, but, you know, very few deals have I done where I just say with 100% certainty this is going to work out. I'm pretty certain, we're pretty certain, but, you know, if you're 100% certain, you might be a little bit too lacking humility, maybe is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
We view development fundamentally as a good thing. Listen, if we own the dog in the neighborhood and somebody comes in and builds something great, that just made our property worth that much more and raised the ceiling for that neighborhood. You know, how do we do it? We look at where are the trendy neighborhoods. Now, I'm still relatively young, but I'm starting to kind of phase out of that being cool, right? And that's okay with me. But when I was young, uh, the neighborhoods that I had friends who were hanging out in, and the neighborhoods that were kind of up and coming, because I was tapped into that network, go there. Those are the places that you should be investing, right? And you have to have a little bit of a long enough timeline. Now, certainly you can flip deals and turn them. That's a great way to make big pops. I think you should also have a portion of your portfolio that you're just kind of like you know, the old Ron, what was his name? Ron Potpourri, set it and forget it. You know, just kind of put that one in the portfolio and forget about it. You know, that's a retirement play, right? But go to those kind of up and coming trendy neighborhoods that you're starting to see little hip joints, little breweries, little cafes pop up, stuff like that, because that urban renewal and urban gentrification is an ongoing process. You know, you look at like a little time lapse of a jungle and it looks still, but there is stuff growing and falling and growing over and all that stuff. So that's a constant process. Go to where the, you know, 20 to 35-year-olds are going, because that's where
Yeah.
everyone wants to be. You want to be around beautiful people, smart people in the trendy neighborhoods. People want to see and be seen.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. That is great advice. So you, particularly earlier in your career, you mentioned that you were successful in buying a lot of sort of distressed loans or distressed loan portfolios. Can you break that down for us in terms of exactly how that works? Somebody has a loan, they get behind. How does that really work? How do you find those deals? You know, let us give us the story.
I'll give you some of it. So,
Yeah. You don't have to give us any of your secrets. Just generally.
yeah. So, you know, lenders are in the business of making loans. And I can tell you, you know, as a lender who has a loan portfolio, you know, my team can service, let's just say, for example, say 100 loans that are paying their bills, right? But if even just a handful of those loans go bad and we have to take properties back as REO, you know, that workload skyrockets. There's an enormous amount of work associated with doing all of these tasks, as opposed to collecting that monthly check and finding a new good loan, right? And so when you build a business to do one thing and it's now doing a different thing, you're incredibly inefficient. And so lenders, and this was at the time where banks, you know, who were heavily regulated, they have to maintain certain reserve ratios, and they have to, you know, maintain other kind of buckets of money that are appropriately balanced so that they remain solvent. And at the time, there was a lot of distressed debt. And these asset managers had stacks of loans on their desks, and they were looking for someone like me that could just come in, get these loans off their desks, and they were willing to sell them at steep discounts so that they could, again, reallocate some of those reserves. And I don't know all the nuance here. You'd have to talk to a banking expert, but it's something like when a loan is good, right? They have to maintain, let's say, a 5 or 10% reserve for that loan. So they make a $1 million loan. They have to maintain, let's say, a 10% reserve, so a $100,000 reserve. But when that loan goes bad, the FDIC basically says, we're going to assume that's going to be a total loss. You need to reserve that entire loan balance to cover those. So that changes their available liquidity to then go out and make new loans. That actually hampers their ability to make more money. So it makes more sense for them to take a little bit more of a loss on one single asset so that they can free up that money to go make more loans and make more money. So they're willing to sell at a discount. I became very good and very well known at being able to underwrite loans very quickly, close very quickly. And so a lot of the attorneys in town got to know me, a lot of the other brokers in town, and a lot of the bank asset managers got to know me. And then what happens is, you know, like anything in life, you do a lot of outbound efforts eventually that slows, and then kind of the inbound calls start coming. Hey, I heard from so and so, down the hall that you helped him with a loan asset. Can you help me with one? Yeah, hey, sure, let's take a look at it. And so, you one of the things that I love about life is I think humans grossly overestimate what we can do in the short term, but we also grossly underestimate what we can do in the long term. And it's so important to have meaningful goals that are far enough out that they act like a guidepost. And you have to really kind of keep that North Star pointed to where you want to go and give yourself enough time to get airborne. I'm a pilot. I like flying. I actually flew this morning. You have to give yourself enough runway to get up in the air. Don't pivot too quickly. Don't change. Hold that focus, hold that course, even through the storm. Hold that line, and you'll get there. I promise. You can't get beaten if you don't quit.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, speaking of holding the line and long term and leaving enough runway, there's been a lot of technological advancements, and the speed with which they're coming is accelerating, particularly with AI and quantum computing. Do you have any insight or thoughts about how or if technology and new technology advancements are going to impact the real estate investment industry?
I know we know this already, but it's worth repeating. There's two types of companies, those incorporating AI and extinct ones, zombie companies that are dead. They just don't know it yet. So you have to be incorporating AI. We're lagging, to be totally honest. We are lagging in our incorporation of AI. But I would say a very brilliant man who went to MIT years and years, decades ago, that I would just say, check him out, is a guy named Ray Kurzweil. And I read a book of his maybe 20 or 25 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it came out, called The Singularity is Near. He's got an amazing prediction accuracy rate. It's like 86% accurate, Ray Kurzweil is, as it relates to technological advancements. Because our, analog brain, we live in an analog world. You and I grew up in an analog world, right? But we're very rapidly moving into a digital world. Digital world moves at exponential rates, right? But if you put that exponential growth on a logarithmic scale and you look at it on a logarithmic graph, it's actually a very smooth line, very, very smooth line, very predictable. And so how will AI and technological advancement, it will contribute to extended lifespan and longevity, quality of life and length of life. It will contribute to massive increases in productivity and output. GDP will continue to rise globally for many, many years. How that impacts us much, much further out, I think is to be determined. But Ray made this prediction, and I'm probably going to get my dates wrong because I just don't remember it perfectly off the cuff. And he made this prediction, I think, 20 years ago. And I think he said something to the effect of, by 2030, we will have a computer that has roughly the same computing power or analytical power as one human mind, which is fascinating. It's absolutely incredible. But the real shocking prediction was, I think he said by like 2039, we would have one computer that would have the same computing power as the entire human race. Now, wow, that is wildly impressive. So what will that mean when you basically have something that has the same computing power as the human race? I think that will solve a lot of really amazing problems. And just to kind of quickly touch on two things that I think are really important, three things maybe. Number one, I and you and I and everyone else on this planet, we're only bound by one set of laws. And those are the laws of physics. So anything and everything that you can imagine that is within the laws of physics, you can do. And I believe literally in virtually unlimited abundance on this planet. We have two infinitely renewable resources up in the sky. The first one is that big, bright, shining star we call the sun, right? That's delivering these beautiful high entropy packets of energy to the earth that basically have caused all life on earth to exist, right? The other infinitely renewable resource that's up in the sky is the coldness of space. And people don't really think about what that could mean in the future, right? I live in Phoenix. Memorial Day weekend, it's supposed to be 105. Ooh, hot. But what's really interesting is these brilliant guys out of somewhere in San Francisco, I can't remember which university, Berkeley maybe. The company I believe is called SkyCool. I'm not involved with it, but they have figured out our atmosphere, mostly nitrogen, right? 80% nitrogen, mostly next oxygen, roughly 20% oxygen, and then some other stuff, CO2, hydrogen, helium, different things like that. Um, if you emit light at a very specific wavelength, it does not interact with the gases of our atmosphere. It goes right out into space. And so they have figured out how to, apply this topical layer, this application on flat surfaces that emits light. If you were to put on infrared goggles and look at this stuff, it's literally glowing because it is so efficient at pushing energy out into space. It is cooler than ambient air temperature. It is sucking energy from the air and pushing it out into space. And it's using the infinite coldness of space as a renewable resource. So I think that as we get a little bit further down the line in some of these amazing technological breakthroughs, be it nuclear, geothermal, solar, infinite cold of space, there are going to be some amazing things that happen. We are alive in the most interesting time to be alive in all of humanity. It is a beautiful day.
Agreed. I love that. So Ray Kurzweil,
well, brilliant tech. If you want to just have a glimpse, he talks about foglets and how you will be able to basically have your own holograms occurring for you and you alone, right? If you want to see your spouse with a different hair, or my wife doesn't like my beard, she'll just be able to kind of click, change the hologram that she's seeing, and I'll be without a beard, right? You'll have customized beards, or you can get customized directions, all kinds of just wild stuff. Ray's an amazing, brilliant mind. Again, these guys out of San Francisco, I think the company's called SkyCool, talking about some of the amazing stuff that they do with the infinite coldness of space. Just two that come to mind right there, but it's incredible. Yeah. And for gene editing, I mean, there's just some amazing AlphaFold and being able to fold proteins. It used to take scientists years just to figure out a couple of proteins. We've now created supercomputers that can create 1,000 protein possibilities that we can go out and test, in basically a computer simulation that would have otherwise taken years and millions of dollars. So we are on the cusp of so many amazing breakthroughs right now. And I think the construction industry, which is a very slow moving, a very kind of archaic industry, is ripe for disruption. We're seeing 3D printing. The last big project that I did, we did prefabricated wall systems that were assembled on site, kind of snapped together, if you will, like Legos. We're going to see more of that. They're assembled in factories in climate controlled conditions. Guys are in the shade. The bathroom's 100 feet away versus walking down 6 flights of scaffolding, creating much more efficiency. I mean, the world is ripe for disruption, and it's going to come from the 20, the 30-year-olds. It's not going to come from guys like us.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun to watch, though.
It is,
and
man.
I couldn't agree more. The construction industry is, I think, a couple of generations behind in terms of sort of efficiencies and technology, and it's going to be really interesting to see.
Well, I'd love to weigh in on why I think that is.
Please.
And I just finished a project we delivered last November, and we put $1 million solar system on the roof of this building. So it was an elevated solar system about, I think, 9 or 10 feet in the air, supported by steel structures on the rooftop of this building. We're in Phoenix again. So it cooled the rooftop. It's now, keeping the roof from getting beat up by the sun. So kind of maintaining that lifespan or helping with the longevity of the roof. All of the HVAC equipment is now shaded, so it should improve the performance and lifespan of that equipment. The bank would not underwrite that $1 million solar system. They said, nope, we're not giving you any credit for it. Literally zero. I go, but I'm offsetting, right? It's like a 350 kilowatt size system. And they go, but I'm offsetting, this specific dollar amount, like 15 cents per kilowatt hour. You do all the math, and I'm able to offset. And again, I forget the math, but I'm able to offset like $80,000 a year in costs, right? Bottom line, I can point to it right there. And they go, no, it's not what we do. We're not financing it. So I had to raise another $1 million to pay for that portion of the project. Now, when I go to sell the building, I will actually get that at, let's say, a 5 cap, right? A 5% capitalization rate. So the building or the solar system cost me, let's say, $1 million, but it's driving about 1.7 or 1.8 million in value to my bottom line. And that's why we're not seeing rapid adoption of new technology, is because financing. Bankers are not willing to finance this stuff. They go, look, the machine's not broken. Don't fix it. Don't work on it. Don't touch it. We just want to keep the printing press going, right? And I think, unfortunately, there's going to be some amazing, advancements come. They're going to blow by. Absolutely. Like, mom and dad and their Model T, and there's this Formula One car that's just going to go zoom. We got to get the bankers on board.
Yeah. How do we do that?
I'm working on it, man. I'm working on it. What we're trying to do is establish ourselves as players in the financing space, right? Financing other folks like me that are doing interesting things, right? Working in the residential space, the commercial space. And then eventually we want to go to some of the bigger companies of the world, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Apples of the world, and go, hey, you guys just raised $1 trillion or 500 billion or whatever you just raised in these green bonds, right? Some outstanding, outrageous number. You want to put that money to work doing good things, put it to work through us as a conduit, right? And help me lower my cost of capital so that I can provide cheaper cost of capital to guys that are out there actually doing it, We're that conduit between, huge amounts of money and the people on Main Street that are physically where the rubber meets the road.
Gotcha. No, I like that. I mean, if you execute that, you can essentially displace traditional financing if you can bring it to it more efficiently and potentially even cheaper than the legacy system.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah. I love it. Well, look, we're about to run up on time here. Before we do, is there anything that was sort of a speed round? Is there anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you were hoping that we would talk about, or that we didn't mention about your firm or your career?
I think we covered a lot of ground. I could do this all day. I'm passionate about real estate. I'm passionate about, improving communities and making a difference. And I'll just say that it's been one of the most fulfilling things that has happened to me. I started out certainly chasing the dream for myself, wanting to be financially independent. That happened. And, when you chase happiness, it's kind of like a ghost. It's very hard to actually get the happiness. But when you chase the things in life that you love, the happiness follows. So be it real estate or whatever it is in life, I would just say, pursue the things that you love. I've now got 2 young children, and my wife and I love spending time with them and being in our community. Those are my new passions in life, is trying to pass on a better world for them than the one that was given to me. And I think that, standing on the shoulder of giants, that's what we all try and do as we get a little bit older in life, is find fulfillment by giving. You get what you give.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the interesting dichotomies in life that is hard to really grasp. Is I couldn't agree more. Is the more you give, the happier you become, not necessarily the more you receive. So I love it. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And good luck to the kids. They're graduating or going to a different school. Is that right?
No, yeah. So school, obviously the school year's coming to a close. Today they have their exhibition where they will be kind of demonstrating all of the things that they've learned this last semester. They're very excited.
Gotcha.
They're still pretty young. And we're excited to head out and go watch that exhibition and see all the wonderful things that they learned.
I love it. Well, I hope they perform well. We'll be thinking about you. And again, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Brandon, thank you so much. This was a blast.
All right. Likewise. Thanks, Thomas. Hey, everybody. Brandon Ansley, host of the Boundary Breakers podcast. I just wanted to take a second and say thank you so much for all of your support over the last year with the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and go hit the like button, rate the episode depending upon your thoughts, and then leave a comment or two. We'd love to hear some feedback. Also, don't forget that there are more than 50 other podcast episodes for Boundary Breakers on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, or any other mainstream podcasting platform. Thank you guys so much. See you the next episode.